Hi, this is Lex, and welcome to the Fintech Blueprint. It's your podcast about fintech, decentralized finance, digital banking, investing, robo-advice, artificial intelligence, and all the other frontier technology that is transforming financial services. To get more content, like an illustrated transcript of this conversation in your inbox, subscribe at fintechblueprint.com. So without further delay, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast conversation. I'm super excited to have with us today Gwendolyn Regina, who is the investment director for Binance, especially around BNB Chain, and about $1 billion that's earmarked for investments there. And we're going to talk about venture ecosystems, entrepreneurship, investing, as well as kind of her journey into these roles that have important entrepreneurial and geographic footprints. So with that, Gwendolyn, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Lex. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. There's going to be so much meaty stuff I want to talk about, but let's start at the beginning. How do you think about, the foundational career experiences that formed your current views? Like, what are some of the things that really mattered for you starting out?
Love that question, Lex. For me, I've always been interested in how things work and specifically what things are possible. So I really come from a place where I'm extremely curious about science, physics specifically. I pursued physics to quite a high level. And I'm not technical now, but when I think about it, it's really about pushing to the end and asking questions like, okay, what makes up our universe? What is possible? What else can we do? So jumping into like my career and the foundational kind of points in my life to your question, right, is that bringing it to what I've done in my life is that I've done a lot of stuff around the technology startup space. I've worn several hats. As an exited founder, I've started an investment fund. I've led global market expansion. I've worked with deep tech founders, PhDs to build companies. But everything is always around technology. And really one phrase I like to use is that I think one of my roles really have been to catalyze and amplify paradigm shifts. And the phrase paradigm shift can sound, very pompous, depends on how you look at it, right? But I really, really like it because it's really about asking what science and technology can bring us and how it will enable us to live, work, play in new ways, and how society will continue to evolve.
You've done things that kind of touch on technology from the side of exposure and media and, building out kind of media properties, right? So you had co-founded one of Asia's largest tech blogs, and then you did, biz dev for Tech in Asia, and then I see Mashable, right? So really kind of understanding the media business, and that covers tech. And then simultaneously, there's this kind of thread of investing. And to me, investing is really similar to editing. You're taking ideas and you're kind of sculpting away all the fat until you get to something that you think is the truth. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your experience, either building these media businesses, kind of what attracted you to them, and then, also how did that start to translate into investing?
So how I started the tech blog back in 2005, when I was still in school, basically, was because I combined a few of my interests. I combined my interest in technology. I combined my interest in just writing and seeing a problem in the space, which is that at that point in time, traditional media was not covering startups. And so I just started, writing about them because I thought that more stories of innovation within Asia needed to be told to the outside world. So really why my interest in media is that it's such a powerful tool for amplification. It's a powerful tool to tell stories and spread ideas and spread good ideas, right? And have, people learn about new products, new use cases that can, make some parts of their lives more efficient or enjoyable. So my various paths throughout the different media companies was, yes, I started and I started the tech blog, which was acquired by Tech in Asia, which is how I spent time in Tech in Asia. And then later, as you mentioned, I led Mashable's global market expansion to Asia Pacific. Was always around the idea of how media in various formats, right, could really highlight different points of it. Because I started with text, I did some video, I did short form video, and later on in one of my other side things that I did when I was taking a sabbatical was that I also hosted an episode, a documentary for TV around Internet of Things. So I really, really believe in the amplification of good ideas, and media is just one amazing way to do that.
Yeah, and you also get to see all of the ideas. Like, I'm kind of stuck on this editorial function in part because I think for me it's been such a benefit where by trying to identify narratives and figure out patterns, you're actually starting to identify things that are consistent, that are likely to be true, and you start building frameworks that you can apply in other places. Did you see an evolution of technology? Like, what kind of theses did you develop as you did this work?
I actually really like when you say it's like editing. And I'll put it also, like, I'll go further with that, right? Because when you look at media, look at investing, you are looking at a general landscape. That's one common factor. Another common factor is that you do need to be able to obviously deep dive into projects, to companies, understanding the particular product and how it's different. Third point is that you need to also be able to understand, the particular industry. So not just the landscape in general in tech, but also the particular industry, the different perhaps, strings or levers that, are important to the industry, and have a sense of like, almost pattern recognition over time that you have to really do, right? Which is that when you see a new product, you're thinking about, wow, okay, how can it potentially change this industry? Or, hey, actually, I see why this works because of XYZ. So you're absolutely right that they're very, very similar in terms of skill sets. One of the last things also is the ability to look at the numbers. So while many tech journalists are not financially trained, and they may not really go and dig into numbers, and also a lot of these startups are private companies, at least in the Web 2 world, right? You don't talk about Web 3 right now in tokenomics, but you could only have numbers that they give to you, right, to kind of dive on. But even then, you can actually do some DD, your own due diligence, and understanding the product and market a bit better. And so, yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's a lot of the similar stuff. And for me, I think definitely my interest in just looking at a space and covering innovation, and precisely to your point, editing, filtering out which projects and products I want to cover, all basically has been one big skill set that I've been honing for quite some time.
Can you talk a little bit about that investing skill set? Like, how did you develop it? And then what kinds of things did you start finding compelling? And maybe this is a way to open the conversation towards, your focus on Asia and kind of the different geographies within Asia and kind of how you think about tech progress across those.
I think the skill sets for investing are several fold, right? We talked about a little bit about pattern recognition. And second, I would say is that when you go into the weeds of it, is the ability to either see the forest when, say, the team in front of you can only see the trees, or vice versa. So when talking, like, for example, from media perspective, when covering a company, covering a startup, or from an investing perspective, when you're looking at a project, at a company, it's really about being able to zoom in and zoom out all at once almost, right? You're able to understand the experiment that they're doing now, because when they're doing experiment, they're trying to understand one particular thing, for example, which is the tree to cut, for example, or the zoom out and see all the different small experiments that they're making to get to the larger picture. And I think that for me, how I think I honed my skill set was, again, as we talked about, I think a lot of it comes about from a media perspective. I think second also is the ability, or I just like following my curiosity, actually. So when I follow my curiosity, I'm intrigued by big ideas. I'm intrigued by ideas I've never heard before. I love listening to people with from different domains and of different expertise, and I'm always learning. So when I'm learning, I'm asking questions to understand the forest I'm playing in, the playground and the landscape I'm dealing with, right? And so, because only when you understand something enough that you can actually ask a good question that enables you to understand that landscape even better in a more high-def way. And so I would say one of the core for me is that I just really like asking questions. I just really like pushing and learning. And so I think all these has lent to me, again, from a media perspective, but also from an investment perspective, being able to engage with entrepreneurs and builders on a daily basis, teaching me something every day. It's amazing.
Another direction that you've taken this is towards the accelerator, incubator model, where the builder isn't just working on one startup, but you're trying to create really a system to create a lot of startups or filter a lot of startups into ones that are promising. And it sounds like novelty search is something that's important to you. I'll talk about that in a second. And then once you filter them, you figure out ways to accelerate them into companies. And so I'd love to hear about your experience at Meta doing this, and as well as just more broadly, like how you think about scaling a good curiosity algorithm, a good novelty search algorithm. And I'm obsessed with novelty search because I think it's a really interesting rubric, right? It's how artificial intelligence had this leap when it implemented novelty search over just like linear goal optimization. So instead of trying to figure out how to get in a straight line from here to there, like a 5-year forecast, instead you teach the machine to find the newest path, the thing that's the weirdest in some particular mathematical space. And kind of, I think about startups in a similar way where they're trying to jump to the most unusual place and still survive. And so that is definitely a leading question on my end, but I'd love to get your view again on like expanding that framework and algorithm, and then maybe some of your applied experience doing that with Meta.
I love the fact that you talked about the different ways and kind of rubrics, right? Your question was about how we almost fine tune and be better at finding novelty, at finding, and I'll push that even further, right? Not just novelty and new ideas, but also ideas that will stick, right? So almost like preempting and trying to find idea product market fit, so to speak, and then actually trying to execute and to actually try product market fit. So you asked specifically about Meta, and I will kind of link that and zoom out also a little bit more, is that ultimately the Meta experience was slightly different because it was really targeted at a specific kind of company that really was at the cusp of rapid hyperscale growth, right? So it was quite specific. So which meant that we looked at, several kind of key metrics that were fairly easy to kind of ascertain. So leading indicator from within the Meta site was looking at, sure, just their publicly stated stats, right, in all the different tech blogs, but also then how much they're spending on ads, right? It's always a leading indicator, because especially for consumer products. So I think that experience was a little bit more unique, so I want to kind of talk a little bit more about investing in general to answer your question about finding novelty. Yeah. So So I would say that from that how I think about it from an idea generation and finding novelty perspective, and I'm not sure whether I have a fully formed rubric or framework like perhaps you do, Lax, right? But for me, if you want to be systematic about it, I can give you an example where I worked with, again, PhDs to create new companies, and that model was extremely exciting because it was I wouldn't say it's systematic, but we try to be as systematic as possible. So I worked with Entrepreneur First. And Entrepreneur First, for those of you who haven't heard of Entrepreneur First, it's a company, it's a fund, it's a company that brings in individuals, a lot of them with PhDs and some people with more of a business background. You bring these individuals together. You're giving them, you're investing in them essentially, and they kind of meet and then they discuss ideas and teams form and then teams break up, right? So my experience there taught me a lot because ultimately when you think about it, when you talk about investments, people keep saying it's team, team, team. And it's absolutely true, right? So my question to myself back then was that, are we able to create a co-founding team that works? Is it an intractable problem, right? And I link that to another field, which is that, can you solve dating? Right? You've seen in the last many years, dating apps have come up, a lot of them succeeded, but it's always a question of like, can you really find your match? So in the technology startup world, that was kind of what we were trying to do. Can you find your co-founder match? And so the question then we abstracted out, it's almost like a human equation, right? Can you list down all the variables needed in a founder, then have coefficients associated with it in terms of strengths, the importance of it and stuff like that. And then have your own, you have your own score and you score other people on this, human equation algorithm, right, for a founder. And I think the question I learned over my time then, and also just throughout my investing career and speaking to many people, is that I personally think it's quite an intractable problem, but if you can possibly use technology and incubation programs like Entrepreneur First and like many others out there, something at BNB Chain and what we're doing also is we have incubation program, and you are able to potentially solve for 60 to 70%, I think, of the human part of a founding team and thus a startup. So this part has really captured my attention on the last several years. That's one key thing, Lex.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a great transition to what you're doing now. And I'm going to just start with a naive question, which is maybe a difficult question, but what is Binance?
Binance is the world's largest centralized crypto exchange. That's one description, but I will go further and say that Binance has been a company for the last 5 years that has really been able to transform the blockchain and crypto industry with just the sheer number of products that has experimented with and gone out to the market, and also onboarding many people into the crypto space. And really, in that sense, being able to, help the ecosystem and the world at large redefine and reinvent the world's financial infrastructure in such a way by again onboarding people. So Binance's tagline is, its goal is really to free money. And I think has done quite a phenomenal job over the last 5 years.
What are the marquee products that Binance has? The crypto exchange is one and well known, but what are the other large projects?
So one product, I guess, or projects, Binance NFT has done really well. It's a NFT launchpad, has worked with several games. That's been interesting because when you look at what has happened over the last few years, right, as we all know, has been, NFT, mania, right, so to speak. So that's one project that has done really, really well. And another kind of part of it's not part of Binance, but part of the general Binance portfolio of companies and partners is Trust Wallet. So Trust Wallet is one of the largest wallets with about, I think, 600 over 1,000 and more users, right? And it's it is multi-chain, it has many assets, and so it's done really, really well as well. And I think the last point I wanted to make is that from an innovation perspective, Binance believes that, CZ has gone on, and spoken about it publicly many times, is that, and I mean, this is me kind of semi-quoting him, right, is that he believes that decentralization is the way to go. So in terms of the centralized exchange component, it will exist, but he believes in the future of the decentralized side of crypto as well. So one experiment that Binance did within the app is that allowing Binance users to connect to DeFi products like PancakeSwap. So that has been an experiment over the last several months. So I would say that these little experiments has really enabled Binance to really, again, have such a large user base.
And how large is that user base?
Tens of millions, 100 million. I don't have the exact numbers, but tens of millions.
It's an incredible success story in terms of adoption. One of the things, of course, that really matters is the BNB chain, or what was previously known as the Binance Smart Chain. And I think this directly relates to like your focus and how you're thinking about investing in and around that protocol. Can you talk a little bit more about that mandate, and then maybe a little also about what the purpose of the protocol is and what it's trying to be?
Yeah. So the mandate, really, the goal is to grow crypto and to onboard 1 billion users to the crypto as a nice round number that collectively we think is a good goal for everyone to have as their North Star. And to do that, we are BNB Chain, a core team at BNB Chain. We're looking at many different things, right? So first, of course, is making sure that as a whole, the industry is even more secure, because obviously security has a lot of scams, spams, stuff like that. Such stuff will always exist in the first, in the nascent stages of any kind of technology in any field, right? So that's part and parcel, so to speak. But security has been one important thing where, for example, at BNB Chain, we announced something, we launched this product called Red Alarm. So Red Alarm resides on DApp, which is a place where we use market data to rank the top DeFi, GameFi, and just top dApps on BNB Chain. But Red Alarm really is we just launched it, and it looks at projects and highlights high-risk projects so that, both, like, everyone can be warned in terms of against interacting with them. So that's one key thing. And I think the second key thing in terms of kind of thinking about how to reach this goal and, is to really think about onboarding Web 2 to Web 3 users, right? So that bridge between Web 2 and Web 3 is very important, where we are actively talking to many traditional Web 2 companies and helping them with their blockchain strategy and onboarding the BNB chain, and so I think this part is very important, because what we have now, all of us in the Web3 space right now, we are kind of talking amongst each other, right? We have our own lingo and stuff like that, but we're still a small percentage of the world's population, and thus the benefits and the beauty of the Web3 world is still just amongst us. So we really want to make sure that we're able to grow the pie, like I said earlier. And so the Web 2 to Web 3 aspect is important. And how we do that, and just do a little tangent here, is that it's by making sure that we're talking to the big traditional Web 2 companies, but also second is that we'd love to see more projects, protocols, and dApps kind of thinking about bridging that space. So Web3 Auth is an example of a project in the Binance portfolio, which enables people to do social media logins with the Web 2 social media logins, right? And yet interact with Web3 and have a non-custodial wallet. So that's really interesting. We want to see more projects like that to think about bridging that gap better. And kind of the last few bits when you ask about investment mandate in thinking about BNB Chain is that we really want to think about real life use cases. So with that, there's a whole slew of things, right? When we look at what the trends have been in the Web3 space, again, we have DeFi, GameFi, and NFTs. We're seeing a lot more the intersection right now. One thing that we have, we're really going deep into is a term that the core team coined, which is MetaFi. The meta here means metadata because it really goes to the ethos of Web3, which is the portability of data, right? So we, under this catch-all term, there's a lot of other things. We have SocialFi, we have DAOs and different kind of toolings, and that could be we could dive into that in the next questions or something, Lax. But really, in terms of use cases, I think it's really important to think about real life use cases. One thing I'd like to add is that how I think about it, bringing back kind of the investment lens, is that ultimately what I believe is that human behavior does not change. How it can evolve or change is because there are different incentives incentivizing different kinds of behavior, right? So then when I bring all these aspects together, when I look at projects, it's really about what new use case are they doing in a Web3 space, but yet it's familiar to just an average human, to a human being, right? And it's really about thinking about that from that perspective where, humans have been we're just naturally, for example, social people, right? We are social creatures, and, we're incentivized by sociability, but there's a whole slew of things. And it's just wrapping around that lens of that human behavior does not change, and asking a question, what kind of new use cases will be interesting to have that humans will still do?
I definitely want to pick up on that and play around with that point, but I just want to anchor kind of a couple of other things about BNB Chain, right? So I think it's got somewhere around 175 million or so unique addresses right now. Of that, about 1 million are active on a daily basis, and then looking at something like 3 million daily transactions. And so it's quite a machine. 2021 saw a lot more activity all over Web3, so things have slowed down a bit, but it's still processing quite a lot. And it's EVM compatible as a chain, and in many ways, when the ETH gas prices became very expensive, there was quite a bit of activity that was offloaded or that was built on BNB at first. And of course, there's competition now quite actively from Polygon, and then the smaller but also very meaningful technologically layer 2 networks, whether it's Arbitrum or Optimism or other chains that are kind of being attached into Web3. The other thing that's important to flag is just the connectivity between Binance and BNB. So obviously, Binance supports the protocol, and one of the most important ways I think it does is to on and off ramp people. So going from the exchange to BNB is very easy, so that large user base can transition to a MetaMask environment where they're doing self-custody and they're on this protocol using various applications. And then once they're there, moving to other parts of Web3 is, I was going to say intuitive, but it depends on how much you like technology. But regardless, is more seamless in many ways. So I think it's a really exciting kind of super highway for people to join Web3. And I wanted to get your view, and whether you have a view on sort of the geographic footprint of that usage, and I've got some preconceptions in my head about, where BNB is popular, where Polygon's popular, and like where the developers are based. But how do you see it? Like, are you targeting particular geographies, or what kind of activities are you seeing across the geographies that you target?
Yeah, from a geo perspective, obviously we don't have the exact geo breakdown. But when we look at how active our community is across the globe, we are strong in many different regions, actually. So you're right? We have 1 million daily active users. So that is definitely global. We have a lot in Asia. We have quite a lot in Latin America, for example, and Europe. quite a fair bit. US is upcoming. So across Africa as well, actually, because we've got quite a community there. So for us, I know I kind of like said kind of globally, but that's kind of the point. We are global.
You started talking about the idea that people will build what they've always built, right? They'll create social groups and they'll create hierarchies, they'll create culture, they'll build businesses and organizations, and they'll produce stuff. What are some of the more actionable investment themes that you see, let's say in this bear market, if it's still that? What are some of the things that you think are right around the corner or that you are really interested in supporting?
Actionable investment themes we're looking right now is a lot of the infrastructure and tooling in general, but also that enables, again, the whole MetaFi category. So it's very broad. So I will do subcategories here. So I think that over the next 1 to 2 years, we will see more depths that around MusicFi and SocialFi kind of really come up. And so now we're seeing the building blocks of the space at this point. And I'm extremely excited about that. I've seen quite a few projects, that does, for example, back-end ops for Web3 teams. I've seen, different kinds of governance, voting protocols linked with much more, secure backing, research. So a lot of people are building, and more social graph tooling, for example, as well, is very interesting. These are the themes that we're kind of looking at this point.
Are there any companies that you feel like are going to be breakout companies, or you're looking at a use case and you think, we need this, finally this is coming?
One project that has had quite a breakout that's native on BNB Chain is Corite, so Corite. It allows musicians to work with their fans to kind of like crowdfund their next upcoming album and release. So that has really gotten quite a lot of traction. One of the musicians that they worked with is Alan Walker, one of the world's most famous DJs. And so that's been quite interesting to kind of look at. And in terms of other kinds of breakouts, well, it's almost like choosing a favorite child, right? I have a few in mind that might be quite interesting, but some of these are kind of like in the non-publicly announced stages. So I can't quite talk about it. We have another one that is very interesting that I'm really excited about is Windcast.io. And what they do is that allow live auction, live bidding for NFTs of live sports, right? So imagine if you're watching a game and there's a penalty kick, for example, you could be live bidding on that, and that could be an NFT. So I think there's some interesting things that we've done, and maybe it will not be a breakout star in the next, 6 months or so, but I'm bullish about seeing how they evolve, and there's quite a few others that I'm quite excited about.
How do these ideas come to you? And maybe inherent in that is a question of like, how do you work with other groups within Binance? Because I think it's a fairly large organization now, it's thousands of people. How do you collaborate with others? And, are there centers of excellence that are helping you see investments, discover investments, accelerate them, and so on?
So when we work with projects right now on BNB Chain, we focus a lot of our efforts in terms of helping the projects and startups connect to the wider BNB Chain ecosystem, right? Because there's many ways that projects could potentially work together and partner in different ways, and not just in marketing, but proper partnership ways. We do that quite a lot. For some projects, it's simple marketing efforts like amplification of tweets, for example, to others that are more, that we think are doing really well and is more strategic and is very important to grow the chain, to fill up the bases, like, for example, infrastructure, tooling, or to go crypto. We can do deeper where we do join GTMs as an example. And in terms of connection to the larger Binance ecosystem is that we do introduce relevant teams to one another. So I mentioned a few earlier, right? So we've introduced Trust Wallet to projects. We have introduced Binance NFT definitely to many NFT projects and gaming projects, for example, who are thinking about doing NFT drops. So how we work with the Binance ecosystem is that we do reach out and kind of, present like, hey, we've got this interesting project that we think could be interesting for you. What do you think? Yeah, there's a lot of introduction of the Binance ecosystem to BNB chain projects that we work with. And to your question about different centers of excellence, so to speak, we do want to make sure we're leveraging resources at large, right? So we do we do work with different products at Binance, but we also really work with a lot in just the general community. And I think that's important because that's the Web3 ethos, right? It's about just working together.
You had mentioned gaming projects, and that's one of the areas where we've been spending a little bit more time recently about thinking through what's going to happen in video game entertainment as it overlaps with financial services. What kinds of stuff are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I think how we think about it is that, absolutely to your point, right? The types of games in Web3, they're evolving. And definitely we'll see more ability for gamers to off ramp or to do different kind of staking, and being able to leverage the different kind of DeFi protocols out there. I think what's more interesting about the space is being able to use of course use Web3 natively. So one company I saw some time ago was almost like kind of recreating a Web3 Steam, right? Which is interesting. And being able to have to almost like sell the games as NFTs. And with that, you can potentially also combining kind of Web2 or Web3 technologies, you might be able to geolog some of them, which were quite interesting as well. So I think what we're seeing is that, taking outside the quote unquote the simple stuff of being able to just have trade your NFTs on different marketplaces and staking and stuff like that. I think we hopefully should be seeing more of such potential innovations. I think one thing I'm excited about in this particular space is what might be interesting is that if we can all have the different games NFTs, coexisting in one particular metaverse, would that be interesting or not interesting? Like, I don't know. Like, I think if we have different games, the characters from different games and NFTs appearing in one metaverse, for example, your NFTs could be, in zombie gear, right? And another gaming character kind of design is something that's almost opposite, like very posh or funky or whatever it is. And I'm personally, this is an open question I'm asking myself, right? Like, I'm very curious to see how the space evolves from that perspective. And this is nothing to do with tech, but more from a human behavior where we want to see different characters kind of meld into this one massive world. I'm actually not sure, because it's almost asking the question, will we continue to see almost like a different walled gardens or different walled games? Because obviously Web3 allows the walls to come down way more, right? I think the answer to that, my own question would be, is almost going to be a mix. But I'm just personally curious as to where that line might be drawn. Does it make sense, Lex?
Yeah, it does. And I think, the interesting thing to me is that we are having a conversation about these types of changes in human behavior and human attention, in the context of an investment activity, funded by what would historically been seen as like an exchange or a brokerage, right? And that now we're in a world where financial companies or companies focused on financial exchange have to understand the platform shifts of where people are going and the types of things that they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So I think here at BNB Chain, the core team, right, we are really bullish about a lot of things. So of our 1 million daily active users, 40% are gamers. So your question, it's really perfect for us, really, because 40% of them is huge, right? And so, but again, a lot of these games are still very basic, so to speak, or simple. And we're just excited to see it evolve and just see the ecosystem evolve.
Well, I'd love for our listeners to be able to find out more about you as well as more about, BNB Chain and Binance. Where should they go to do that?
So to find out more about BNB Chain, our Twitter handle is @BNB Chain. Super, super simple. And there, for curious builders and developers who are thinking about coming onto the BNB Chain ecosystem, there is a Discord channel where you can really ask a lot of questions and also request for marketing help, for example. And so I think one thing I want to emphasize regarding BNB Chain is that we are EVM compatible. We support a multi-chain world, and we really, really welcome builders. We have another hackathon coming up, relatively soon. So we definitely want to see more builders coming into this space. And yeah, personally, I met Gwendolyn Regina. And so that's, I think, that's the Twitter handles. Yeah, so BNB Chain would be one of the key ones.
Fantastic. Gwendolyn, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Lex, for having me and your questions.
Hi, everyone. That's it for this week's episode of the Fintech Blueprint. For more technical deep dives into all things fintech and decentralized finance, check out fintechblueprint.com and grab a free subscription to the newsletter. This is Lex, and I'll see you next time.